All right, guys, welcome to the podcast. This week, we're going to talk about turning negative feedback into positive momentum. This is coming from the newsletter that I wrote about It's Not Personal. Okay. So, we're going to jump into a lot of different things this episode. We're going to talk about the 3 types of negative feedback and how we're going to use it and how we're going to process it. We're going to talk about the best tips and tricks that I've heard over time when dealing with feedback. And we're going to look at a biblical perspective on it. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. This is podcast number 7. We're rolling. Let's go. All right. So talking about negative feedback, this is anything from, people saying just mean things to you about choices you've made, decisions you made, something you've tried. It is criticism. It is those comments that we, get that just don't make us feel good. Like you were proud of something and somebody cuts you down, right? You made a decision and somebody disagreed with it. So the first thing we're going to look at is what's worse than getting negative feedback is being so paralyzed by the fear of negative feedback, we never act on it, right? So it's one of those to where the fear of something abstract that may or may not happen can paralyze a lot of people from jumping into something, trying something, getting better, receiving the feedback. It's kind of like, the monster in the closet, right? It's one of those to where if it's so paralyzing to the fear that and it may or may not be there, and the only way to go see if it's there and then like better yourself and not let it fear you, scare you anymore, is to go and look and see in the closet, right? And what I mean by that is if the fear of something is stopping you from doing it, the only thing that you can do to get over that fear is to do the thing. If that makes sense. Like the only way you're gonna get better at something is doing the thing. So if I want to be better at running, I'm going to start running. If I want to get better at lifting, I'm going to lift. I want to get better at photography, I have to shoot photography. Well, if you want to get better at dealing with negative criticism or feedback, you have to deal with negative criticism or feedback. If you don't allow you an opportunity to receive that kind of feedback or take that kind of criticism, then you're never going to grow, right? It's the quote. I think it was, no, I thought it was attributed to Aristotle, but I think it was actually somebody else. But it said, if you want to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. Right. So that's obviously not going to lead to a fulfilling life at the end of the day. But it's one of those, I think so many people fall into that trap to where, like, instead of doing something, chasing a goal, putting their artwork out there, putting a song out there, saying that they like to do something, going to an event or so, whatever it may be, so many of us get paralyzed by the thought or the fear of something, of negative feedback, a perception or of others, that we don't even do it. So that's what we're first got to conquer. And the second thing is when we receive that feedback, how do we process it and how do we get better at it, right? So for really the first time, I'm trying to think about it. I was really receiving any kind of that negative feedback. I'm thinking about into like playing high school basketball and getting negative feedback from coach or teammates, whatever it might be, to where it's like, and then later it was going to be in my professional career when I became a teacher and a coach, in both elements, both as teaching and coaching, making the wrong call, making the wrong substitution, the wrong play, in the classroom, not doing something correctly, somebody trying to better my teaching, but I took it as negative feedback. And then when you get into administration as assistant principal, and then as a principal now, that feedback, there's definitely more of it. So it's one of those to where you're going to hear a lot of opinions from a lot of people, and a lot of it's not going to be just pats on the back saying you're doing a good job, right? So I've kind of like learned over time several ways to deal with that negative feedback. And here's just what's worked for me that's changed my whole framework on receiving that. There's 100 different ways to receive it and grow from it, but this is just what I found out over time. So the whole idea of like it's not personal, right? So I think the biggest fear that we have is being told these bad negative things, and it just feeling so attacked on your personal story and character that it's just like out to get you, and really it's not. And I'm gonna explain this in 3 different ways. So one way is that it's really not you, it's just a difference in preference. So let me explain on that. So if I go buy a red shirt and I'm proud of my red shirt and I put on my red shirt, and somebody comes up to me and said, red shirts are the worst, blue shirts are better. Well, it's easy in that context to know, well, I just prefer red shirts and you just prefer blue shirts. Like you don't really take it too personal. You might, but you just realize that you're like, oh, you're not attacking me or my choice. You just prefer something else, right? So a lot of criticism is people saying, I prefer to live my life differently than you live yours. Which when you say it like that, it's like, "Oh, why would I let that bother me?" It's like, yeah, of course we have different preferences. Of course we have different ideas on how we wanna live and the choices we make. That's what makes life better and beautiful and more diverse, and, there's a lot of beauty in that, right? So, a lot of it's just preference. So, if you're gonna receive criticism, somebody might just be saying, "Hey, I prefer it this way versus that," but we will take that as a personal attack on us of like, "Why would you Man, you look so ridiculous wearing a hat backwards. You're supposed to wear them forward." If I let that just eat me up and ruin my day and make me never want to wear my hat backwards or post a video again because I'm wearing it because of this, then that's kind of a ridiculous way to think about it. But a lot of the criticism, if you can filter of like, okay, somebody said something, there's obviously some disagreement there. What does it come down to? Well, one, it might be a difference in just preference. Okay. The next would be a difference in perspective. And it gets a little bit more complex here, but people are going to perceive things differently because their perception is their reality, right? So some of us will have a different, let's see, perspective. Let's just go back to the education, for example. As a principal, there's an element of authority over kids, right? So with that authority over kids, or even as a teacher, as a coach, some people don't deal well with authority. So some kids have a perspective of authority through either their parents, who absolutely hate the cops because they're making bad choices and awful and always complaining about the man holding us down, and always anytime they're told what to do, they have an immediate rebel reaction. And kids will grow up in an environment to where the only way they see authority is in a negative context. It's never in a way of like coaching to get us better, to build a better community, a better society, a better school. So a lot of times when there's any kind of authority to a kid, how they received authority in their life will change how they perceive you in that moment, right? That's just the first one I can think of. A different perspective could be how, if you chose a career like becoming a police officer, and certain people have very negative perspectives based on their experiences with police officers for whatever reason, right or wrong, they can criticize you because of that, saying, why would you ever want to become a police officer? They're awful and evil and make everything all, terrible. Like they just want to abuse power. But if you've had positive perspectives of police officers, like, hey, that's really honorable. You're out there to protect people and help people. So a lot of our choices or criticism is because people are going to come to a confrontation point of you put yourself out there and now there's criticism of somebody had a different perspective, and they're going to use their perspective to make a claim or a comment on your life, right? So, and it gets a lot more complicated than that. So, when we have a difference in perspective, like especially when it gets into the political realm. So, for example, if we just talk about public education, just because that's my world and what I live in, it's easy to make references to. When I think about public education of people's view of it, I mean, it's politically divided. It's very polar in nature to where people either are pro public education or people are very anti public education. And a lot of that's going to be because of their perspective of their experience of the public education that they are aware of. So, inner city, Houston, Dallas, different states, New York, California's view of public education is going to look a certain way. So if you're interacting with those schools, you're going to think that it's going to be a very natural bias to think that all public schools operate that way compared to rural East Texas suburban schools or wherever you might be. Like that suburban school it's a much different small school environment where teachers know the names of their kids. It's positive. You're plugged in. The community comes together. Like there's going to be different perspectives on public education, right? Or even think about the kid that's, had a really good friend group and they were involved in sports and teachers knew my name and they had good teachers around them. They had good friends around them. They had successful winning teams that they were on. Like they're going to have a very good view of, for one, school, but two, public education in those schools compared to kids who go to schools where they might have been not plugged in. They had maybe a toxic group of friends, maybe had some bad teachers, bad leadership at the school. They might have a very just view of, no, public education is awful. It made me feel isolated and horrible, and I hated every second of it. So when we look at complex things that have a lot of different perspectives, the criticism of it, once again, isn't personal. Like in my life, as a principal, I mean, I mentioned in the anchor point, I had a lady Well, let me get to the third one, then I'll tell you about the story. So the third one is when you do have people that are trying to hurt others. And even this one isn't personal. It's just somebody trying to hurt somebody. Like you just happen to be in front of that person at that time or in a position to where they could make a comment on you to make themselves feel better either through power or just hurt people hurting people. This category is the one that actually does sting the worst, but this is the paradox when you for two reasons. Because more than likely it's because something that happened in their life that are making them outpour, manifest this hate on somebody else. It's starting and manifesting from them. It's not from you. And the second part of it is if you allow it to hurt you, if you allow it to make yourself feel worse and condemn you, you're actually letting them win. They are the predator, you become the prey, and you begin to act like prey. So the more you allow the people who want to hurt people hurt you, the paradox is then you're allowing it to personally affect you, if that makes sense. So it's one of those where it doesn't manifest personally, it just manifests from some probably horrible bad thing in their life that's going on, some kind of manifested sin that's kind of came out to where they're either were hurt by somebody that like and that position of who hurt them mimicked you at that moment to where they wanted to hurt you. So those are the three main areas. Now I want to get back to the story because I had a one that kind of checked all these boxes. I had a parent very upset with me over a situation that was happening, and essentially it came down to caught a little bit of some cuss words from this lady, and then she said that I think she said like you're a bad leader or you're awful. You don't know how to run this. I'm in management and you're handling this completely wrong. And had it, made it sound probably worse than that. And that sucks to hear. Nobody likes to hear that. But at this point in my career, I've handled enough criticism to kind of filter this of like, okay, well, what made her say that? For one, she had a different perspective than me. She had a perspective where her kid was, and my perspective of the kid were just different because that was a parent and I was in a position where I was protecting the school environment and everything else. And then two, a difference in preference of like, I preferred you to handle it this way. I prefer it to handle this way. And at the end of the day, I think she was just trying to hurt somebody. To be honest, I don't know what it was in her life that she was going at, but I definitely could sense it on the phone. I'm like, this is a lot bigger than this issue with your kid and the fact that I'm on the other end of the phone right now. But anyways, it kind of checked all three of those boxes, and really not being able to look at it with that filter, that would have wrecked my day. That would have wrecked my week. That would have made me upset. It would have made me sad. Like nobody likes hearing that kind of stuff. So that was one of those where it's like, man, that sucked. But when we start looking at this negative feedback through that lens, it does help you kind of process it. So that's what's worked for me. Next, and I'll just list off about the 7 biggest tips and tricks that I've learned when it comes to criticism. It's either a quote I heard, something I realized, but anytime we're getting feedback, whether it's positive or negative, but in this sense, we're kind of talking about negative feedback of somebody disagreed with the choice you made, somebody said it wasn't good, somebody said you did a bad job, the stuff that you typically just don't want to hear. Here is 7 things that just come to mind. Okay. One is the number one trait you can have on any team, in any position, in any place in life is being coachable. So if there is feedback and there is an opportunity to get better, there's an opportunity to lean into somebody's wisdom. If it is a place of authority that has good intentions with you, that give you negative feedback, if you can be coachable in that moment, saying, even if you disagree in that moment, say, okay, I'm trying to look at it from your perspective. I'm gonna try this out and I want to get better. Thank you for the feedback. If you can do that, swallow some pride, swallow some ego, and be coachable. That is the number one trait I think any coach, employer, boss, CEO is going to want. Because at the end of the day, if you're a part of this team and receiving feedback from a superior position or somebody who has more experience than you, it's an opportunity to get better. Okay. So if you can do that and you can show that, hey, I did it this way, you gave me feedback, I altered it, and then at the end of the result, you do what they say and you get better and they get better, then it's a win. It wasn't a them being mean problem. It's probably a pride or ego problem. Because at the end of the day, if you did get better because of it, it's a win, right? But also if you take the feedback and you don't get better or it doesn't make the product better, it just shows you're coachable, and it kinda shows they were wrong. Like, really, it's like, "Well, you should've done it this way." "Alright, yeah, I'll try it next time, let's go." I mean, I could see that being better. Then you try it and it doesn't, then it's not on you. You're not being the stubborn, uncoachable employee or team member. You're now the coachable team member that went with the plan that was given to you or the feedback that was given to you, and the end result is now not in your hands as much. Now you're not trying to do this in a sabotaging way, but like at the end of the day, if you truly take their feedback and get better from it, and you're coachable, then at the end of the day, you're going to be better. They're going to be better, and you're going to be a better employee, which is going to give you better, opportunities to advance. Right. So it's kind of like the difference in the guy that always knows, like, oh, need you, you should do this. Oh yeah, no, I'll do that. Or, hey, you should do it this way. Well, no, I didn't do it that way because of this. Instead of having that opposition, just be, yeah, I can totally try that next time. I can see how it would work. Let me do it and do it next time. Like that's going to get you hired and, moving up the chain faster than anything else. Not being coachable and not taking feedback, even if it's negative, even if it kind of attacks the pride and ego a little bit, is only going to hurt you in the long run. So, highly recommend being coachable through negative feedback. The next is, it kind of goes with the first one, but the second one is it true? Like, just ask yourself, even if it hurts, even if they say it in a mean way, is it true? Okay. So if it's one of those to where, go back to, my high school basketball coach, and he tells me, hey, your shot selection was awful tonight. Well, hey, coach, that hurts. I was playing really hard. He's like, no, let me show you why. Because you shot, 20%, from the field, and the shot selections you had, I think a few more passes, we could have got a better shot as a team. Let me show you on film. And he shows me on film, and my shot percentage is that. And yeah, it's like, well, crap. Yeah, that does hurt to hear. And he probably said, he could have said it in a mean way, but he was right. So it's up to me once again to be coachable and like, hey, this is true. Like if objectively it's true, so it's something I can get better with. Other elements in life, it's, you know, hey, you did it this way and it didn't work. Or if somebody says, hey, that's a bad idea because whatever it might be, instead of saying immediately defending your idea because of how well you thought it out, it's like, okay, is what they're saying true? Because once again, it comes down to perspective and perception. So there were some initiatives I had at my last district where I wanted to try some different kind of bigger scale stuff that's going to involve a lot of different people. It's going to take bus drivers and custodians and food service to do like these kind of bigger events for kids that I was working with. And I was trying to do some kind of somewhat innovative stuff that the school hasn't seen yet. Anytime you're doing that, sometimes you're going to get some opposition and some resistance just because you're doing something different. And that's okay and understandable because everybody's got deadlines and jobs that are already difficult. But there was a couple times where I came up with something and I had some other departments say, hey, you shouldn't do that. That's not going to work. And immediately my gut reaction is like, no, it's going to work. Like I've already thought about this, but I was looking at it from my perspective. I wasn't looking at it from food service and then managing food and getting all the kids fed in a certain timeline, or maintenance being able to create the stage or whatever I might have been doing, or custodial being able to prep the facility, right? So being able to take feedback and say, hey, that's a bad idea, and be like, well, I thought about it. I think it's a really good idea, but is it true? Could I be wrong here? Let me listen. Will you please tell me why? And if it's true, like, oh yeah, you really can't feed kids, that many kids in that short amount of time, just because you're doing this fun little learning thing with them, right? So some of it's like, slow down, swallow the pride, swallow the ego, and ask, is it true? Is this negative, feedback true? It could be, maybe you're, I don't know, recording a song and you put it out there and it goes to somebody says, oh, that sounded awful. You messed up this timing with this. You're like, oh wow, why did you have to say awful? That kind of hurt. But then you go back and listen to it and it's like, oh yeah, I was off there. Like, it's just one of those to where if it's true, it's an opportunity to get better. Let's see, which goes with number 4. These all kind of connect. Is like, what can I learn from this? Right. So if you get some negative feedback or criticism on, I would say maybe just because it's a different group of people that you don't share with, whether it's either professionally, personally, whatever it might be, and they give you that criticism, it gives you an opportunity to learn and make better decisions in the future, right? So ever since, those events that I was talking about at my last district where we tried to do these kind of innovative, it was almost like student conferences kind of thing to where we had keynote speakers and we did breakouts. But I was able to learn of like, okay, now the next time I plan this, I do have to look at it from the lens of, bus travel and custodial and food service. So the learning moment is like I can better plan in the future if I can receive that feedback. So even if it's, even in the coaching world, when I was trying to run a certain type of offense and somebody comes up and said, "Hey, that's not going to work. That's awful. You should do it this way." And instead of fighting the battle of like, "No, this is going to work. Like I know what I'm doing." Get to the whiteboard, ask them, "Hey, I'm missing something. Can you show me?" They get on the whiteboard, X those, they show you like this guy, you're actually not gonna be able to block this guy, or whatever it might be. That is what you can learn in the moment, and you're only gonna get better. So if you can see that feedback and say, "Okay, what can I learn in this moment?" You're gonna get better, and that's the end goal. If you want to be right, argue all you want. If you want to get better and grow, take the feedback and ask yourself. All right, the next one is, we're kind of shifting gears a little bit. It's actually going to be here's the quote is, "Bees don't waste time convincing flies honey tastes better than," I'm going to say garbage here, tastes better than garbage. Now this is kind of a tough topic because it almost gives that prideful, egotistical, like I know it's better than you and I'm judging you for garbage. And that's not what this is about. So this is more about you're going to make the best decision that you can, or the make the action that you can take that is honey, that is the right decision and it's good, and you have to take this decision, right? Other people are going to disagree with it, and not always for logically sound reasons. They're going to say, "No, that's stupid. You shouldn't, go run a marathon. That's a stupid waste of time, da 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 da, whatever," right? Well, it's like, hold on. Well, marathon, this has been really good in my life. The discipline of running has made me better mentally and physically. My family supports me. I want to do hard stuff in front of my kids. Like, it's honey. It's good. But if somebody's going to sit there and say that's stupid, you shouldn't do it, that's kind of just a garbage opinion of like, okay, maybe you're just saying this to hurt me, but I don't know why you hate this. I don't know if it's perspective or perception, but I know this is a good decision, so I'm going to run with it, and I'm not going to waste a lot of time convincing you that physical exercise is good. You know what I'm saying? Like that's more what I'm saying in this moment. So another one of those is, and I didn't include this in the anchor point, but it's one of those where I've only encouragement seems to really flow heavily top down, and hate or negativity flows upward. And what I mean by that is just using the marathon for example. Like when I've signed up for an ultra marathon or a marathon or a Spartan race, whatever it might have been, the people who have done that and have went through the difficulties of training are so encouraging. They understand why they pour into you. The people who don't are like, "Oh, that's dumb. That's a waste of time. Why would you do that? You shouldn't do that." And that's just one example. The other example might be, chasing a dream, starting a business, doing the harder, more difficult things. The ones who have typically done those things in my life have done nothing but encourage and pour into me. And I've had others who haven't, that are just friends and family that encourage me too. But it seems like, especially online, and we're going to talk about online in a second, on the internet, it just seems like those who have done the hard things and took the step, the risk, typically encourage and are very positive for those who are trying to do it. And it's kind of the inverse effect of those who have not done it criticize those trying. It seems like, and I've seen that more than I haven't dealt with it personally. I've had a pretty good circle of people around me when it comes to all the stuff that I'm doing, but definitely one that comes to mind there. Let's see. And also, like, I would say the internet just creates this false feedback loop. So there's so many things that are said online that just wouldn't that people wouldn't say this in person. I mean, for the most part, like I can't see the comments on videos being said face to face in person where you can physically, contact others, where it's like, for one, you might get hit in the face. Two, you would see that that's a real person and wouldn't say those negative things. And like, three, where's this false sense? Like, what is sparking this to come out of you online because you're scrolling through a screen? It doesn't feel real. It's almost like a false sense of a feedback loop that really just doesn't. It's kind of interesting to me that it doesn't really exist, but it's probably 99% of our thoughts and feedback loop now. I mean, almost all the feedback I have of people who challenge me and push me and say, "Hey, Cam, you probably need to think that. You need to rethink that. You're missing something here." Or like, I've had a really good buddy of mine, like a mentor of mine. He's like, he used some more colorful language that I'm gonna use on the channel, but he said, "That's a terrible idea. Don't do that." And I had to swallow my pride. I'm like, "Whoa, why?" And he explained it, and he saved me from making a really bad decision, but, not bad as, like, gonna hurt anybody, just it just would have looked bad. I don't know, 'cause I might can go in details later. I might even try to get him on the podcast, but, um, it was, one of those to where the things you say in person, if you're giving negative feedback in person, I feel like, and especially in smaller group, like you're not at a, somebody's up there on a microphone and you're screaming, "No, you suck." I mean, it doesn't happen the way the internet does. Like, because you really just don't waste your time going to talk to other people to tell them that they're bad. Like, if somebody's playing his guitar at a coffee shop, 99% of the time, people are just going to be like, "Oh, that's awesome, man. Thumbs up, way out, clap." A lot of people aren't going to go up saying, "Oh, you suck. You played that wrong. Your voice sounds terrible." Like, but the internet provokes that. So I think a lot of things that we're really scared of kind of goes back to the monster in the closet or the boogeyman in the closet. It's really not real. It's vague. It's not even. It doesn't really exist. Just the fear of it, or even just the concept of it, is more scary than what it actually is. And it goes back to my last point, which is sticks and stones, man. Like, words will never hurt you, which I mean, I think that is kind of false when it's words can hurt, but typically the words typed out on the internet, not as much. And I say that I'm probably going to receive something on this video and it's going to make me like break me for like a week, but it's one of those where like at the end of the day, like it is only words, and you can either use the words that are given to you as information and data to get better and to grow, or if you use it to ruin your day, it kind of just becomes this vague fear that doesn't really exist more. It exists more in your head than anywhere else, right? So, anyways, that was my first, comments on the negative feedback loop, and just not taking things personal, and how to use that criticism that's unpleasant and kind of hurts to hear in a way that's actually gonna give you positive momentum and growth, right? Let's see. Okay, so the last one is the biblical perspective, and this one is where it shifts differently um, than what the first part of this I talked about, because negative feedback and criticism, I would probably argue that that's probably gonna be more defined as like persecution for Christians, and persecution for Christians is actually very, very biblical, obviously, when it comes to Jesus who was crucified and persecuted. Like, it's a very innate nature of Jesus, of Christianity, interacting with this world. So in our faith, negative feedback, Christianity is actually a sign that we're living a faithful life in Christ, which is, obviously ironic and, kind of a paradox, but it's actually written in so many places. And I'll pull up those verses real quick. They're included in the newsletter. Let's see. So I thought I had this pulled up. All right, so we'll go over through a couple Bible verses that talks about this, and then we're going to explain it as a kind of more of a 50,000 foot view, kind of backing up a little bit. So let's see. The first one is going to be found in Matthew, and it's going to be 5, 11, 12. The Gospel of Matthew is a guy who followed Jesus around and wrote about all the things that he said and did on earth. So God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of either things against you because you are my followers, talking about those who follow Jesus. Be happy about it. Be very glad, and for a great reward awaits you in heaven. So immediately is saying that you are blessed when you are mocked. You are blessed when people persecute you. You are blessed when they lie about you, because it is a sign and an indicator that you are being a light in a dark world. It is in a dark world. It is a sign that you're following Jesus in a place that doesn't follow Jesus. And that is essentially what we're called to do when it says, go making disciples of all nations. We have to go to nations that aren't disciples. And that's not geographical, physical nations. It's different bodies of people to where it's not happening. So, and once again, if you go back to the perception and the perspective and trying to hurt others, this is what you're going to see. So let me go a little bit further. 2 Timothy 3:12, it says, indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. And Timothy, I want to say this is where Paul is writing a letter to Timothy, kind of preparing him for his life in ministry and discipleship. I think I could be wrong there, but I know Paul is the one who at some point kind of trains up Timothy, but I could be a little bit wrong here. But anyways, once again, it says, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. Next one, John 15:18 through 20. Another gospel of a guy who followed Jesus around, wrote down the things he said, wrote down the things he did, interacted with them, was friends with him, spent a lot of time with him. So in John, it says, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. And this is Jesus talking. It's just him recording it. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. So once again, we're seeing the nature of Christianity and Jesus and the world in a broken, fallen world is going to incite that negative feedback, which in this case is not really criticism. It is criticism of saying, hey, but it's also what we'd call persecution. This is really going to be in the three of trying to hurt others because you want to try to hurt others. But it's also going to be a different and probably perspective as well, because they're not looking at the perspective of you as a Christ follower. They're more coming from the perspective of broken person who probably had some negative experiences with religion at some point, right? Let's see. And the last one is 1 Peter 4:12 through 14. Peter was a disciple of Jesus. He followed him around, but this one really wasn't a gospel. I can't remember who he was writing to in this one. I think it was a church at that time of Christians, but I can't remember. I should have looked it up, but it's too late now. Here we go. But it says, dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. If you're insulted because of the name of Christ, you are blessed. Now, once again, this is because the name of Christ. This isn't because you're out there being a jerk to people. If you're being criticized because you're out there being a jerk to people, you deserve that criticism because they're right? But if you're actually approaching others with gentleness and kindness and truth and spreading love, while spreading truth, you're not going out there in the judgment side of things of saying you're living an awful life, God hates you, that kind of stuff, because that's ridiculous. But if you are approaching those with, like as Christ did, with truth above all else, but also love and gentleness and kindness, and you're still being persecuted, you are blessed. So what's common about these is that it was talking specifically about us in Christ, not just us being religious or us saying religious things. It's us in Christ rooted in love. If we are being persecuted for those things, that is actually a good sign and we're actually blessed, which once again, this is kind of a huge kind of theological and philosophical concept of, well, why would a loving God say you're blessed when bad things happen to you? So what I would do to kind of help me understand that, I would shift my perspective, okay? And instead of saying like a why God statement, which it's a pretty nice place to be in. And when you're saying, why would a God so-and-so, think about what happens when there's goodness in a broken world, okay? So let's just, a couple of examples. Let's just say, this has happened to me several times, and if my brother watches this, he's probably going to laugh because he knows of what's going to happen. But there's been a few times in my life where I tried to help like an animal that was either hit by a vehicle or injured or attacked maybe by a dog or whatever else, like some squirrels, some birds. When I put myself in a situation where I can do good for this broken situation, there's risk involved, right? So, and it's not really the fact that why would God allow this? It's more saying when we are called to do good things and to be like Christ in a place that is not, then there's risk. So we risk ourselves when we're trying to help an injured animal because we might get bitten or scratched. I've been bitten several times. Squirrels bite really hard. But yeah, anyways, it's just one of those to where it's the nature of God in a godless place. It's nature of a light in a dark place. It's nature of, good and bad, okay, and broken. So when we're saying like you're blessed, he's saying that, hey, it's almost like a calling. If you're persecuted in the name of Christ and you're doing good things, that is actually a blessing, and that's how you're supposed to be living your life. Go a little bit further, even in like a very small view of like, no, it's really not a good example. Let me just go to the book that I referenced here. So, the best book that's really helped me understand this, and I don't have it physically in my hand right now. It's called "The Insanity of God," and it's by Nick Ripken. I think it's an alias because he's doing a lot of like some kind of crazy mission work in like China, which is Christians are heavily persecuted there, and some other places. So I don't think he actually revealed his identity, but anyways, the book is called Insanity of God, and it's all about him doing mission work in different countries and how heavily those Christians are actually persecuted, not like it is in the Western American world. It's not just because people are saying mean things about Jesus. It's like people are getting killed and beaten and thrown into prison and gulags and all of that. But the book is a very difficult read, and it's like, I'll be honest, it's pretty depressing and sad for a long time. But once you get to the end of the book, you realize that the reason Jesus is persecuted, the reason Christians are persecuted, is because it reinforces the nature of what the Bible talks about the broken world in. So it's talking about the world is a fallen world that has sin in it. That means bad things are going to happen, right? There's chaos. There's a lack of order. There's a lack of structure. And in chaos, what happens is bad things happen, especially when you insert good into them. But it also shows that Jesus is worth the persecution. It's talk and really, I mean, I know there is, and I'm sure people could cite different massacres and all kinds of stuff when it comes to all religions because there's been so many of them. But as far as like the persecution today, it seems like Christianity is really the only major persecuted religion that I can think of off the top of my head. But I'm also have a confirmation bias of like that's what I'll look into and read more about. But when it talks about those, I guess there's some other, but when it talks about in that book is saying that the nature of Jesus in this place that it's going to incite and invite persecution, like just like hurting injured animals is going to incite the risk and of being scratched and bitten. Like and it doesn't use that analogy. That's more my analogy, but that is just the risk when it comes to it. And it's really a confirmation that for one, that you are doing what you're called to do, especially when you're doing it in love and gentleness, kindness, and you're not blameless in it, but essentially living a blameless life as Jesus did of like, I'm just here spreading the word, fellowshipping with others, loving others, not doing anything illegal, bad, or awful, and I'm still getting persecuted for it is a sign that you're blessed because you're living as Christ did in a place that's not tolerant of it at the time. So let's see. And it also kind of stated that the persecution, like Jesus and Christianity and God, is worth way more than worldly comfort and pleasure, and any reward you can get in the world won't be worth it, but to suffer for Christ is a greater value than anything we could receive. Obviously a lot easier said than done, and I'm sitting here in the Bible Belt of America, so it's not like I'm really facing persecution like any in the book. I'm not worthy even mentioning the people in the book, but all those different groups of the people in that book. I mean, it is one of the best reads I could ever recommend that can really talk to you about the idea of persecution and feedback when it comes to Christianity. So, and I was a little disorganized. I didn't expect to talk about that this deeply on here. But when it really comes to that criticism, something to think about from I would say the non-Christian side is Jesus's criticism was mainly towards the religious hypocrites at that time. So most of his feedback and negative criticism was talking about the Pharisees and the Sadducees, those who wielded religious authority for power and prideful reasons. He was way more critical of them than probably any other group, even calling them to their face hypocrites, right? So just another thing to think about when it comes to criticism and feedback, because I think a lot of us, who maybe got church hurt or see the religious hypocrisy of Christians and Christianities and different denominations of all sorts, like that is like our number one like thing keeping us from it, when really the paradox or the irony is like Jesus also called those guys out, and Jesus also rebuked them, and Jesus also was hurt ultimately killed and crucified by them, right? So just worth mentioning there. But anyways, just closing this up, these are my filters and the way that I've viewed criticism and negative feedback over time, and really, you know, kind of the motto of Remori and what I'm building here through the newsletters and the Anchor Point newsletters and the videos is the whole idea of something I pray for. I have it written down in my office is wisdom, courage, and discipline. Right. So wisdom is learning applicable knowledge or knowledge from experience in all situations, and that's going to incite that negative or any kind of criticism and feedback. So there's an opportunity for wisdom in feedback, and the next one is going to be courage, to where we can't let ourselves be paralyzed by the fear of negative feedback, because that's just going to limit growth. It goes back to the quote. I can't remember who it was. Let me see if I wrote it down. It wasn't Aristotle, but it was the whole say nothing, do nothing, be nothing if you want to avoid criticism, and that's just not a life worth living. So that kind of comes into the courage aspect of it, of even knowing that I could get scratched or bitten by this animal, even knowing I could receive negative feedback if I post a video where I stutter and stammer and maybe misquote something, even if I, you know, put out my artwork that I was scared to put out. Like, there's going to be a chance for negative criticism and feedback, but the courage of overcoming that is like swinging that closet open, putting your brave face on, and realizing you're not that bad. Even if any kind of issues you have, like, it's never as bad as you think. The fear that you can't define, that's vague, that's like that weight on your shoulders, on your head, of the fear of what might happen, is significantly worse than what could actually happen. So when you actually take the steps to be courageous, which is being scared and doing it anyways, essentially, then that's worth it alone, even if you do or don't receive the feedback to learn from. And the last one with discipline is doing it even when it sucks, doing it even when it's hard, doing it not even when you're not motivated. The discipline is, what the Bible calls self-control. I mentioned self-control several times, but I call it, discipline. However, same concept of, like, even when it gets suck or even when it gets suck, even when it sucks and it gets hard, you just have to keep. I think one of my kids are crying. Yeah, one of my kids are crying. But lost my train of thought. Oh, so the idea of discipline is, like, even when I do receive the negative feedback, even when I get the parent calls, or the parent that doesn't, or the tough coaching conversations, even when it gets hard, I'm going to keep doing it anyways. So that's what I'll close with, guys. This topic I really wanted to talk about more, because it is an area that's grown me professionally, personally, in my faith. More than anything else is actually processing that criticism and feedback, even when it's negative, in a way that can positively grow me, right, and help others. And anyways, that's it. Hope you guys have a great week. Life is short. Go make the most of it. Always be praying for wisdom, courage, and discipline, and seek feedback and grow from it. See you guys. Have a good one.